Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
Over the past year or so, I lost 2 stone, and then put 2.5 back on. And it's not because of my health. It's not because of my health. That's important. You have to be honest about your motivations. Do you want the truth? Can I be honest with you? Can you take the truth? I'm sick of fat people, and I don't want to be associated with them anymore. We used to be sound. Fatties were sound. We were jolly. That was our reputation, wasn't it? Fat people were jolly. That's what people thought of us. Default thought. Not anymore. There's a group of people who've ruined our reputation. They're called fat activists, and these are people who campaign for fat equal rights. I can't even say it with a straight face. Fat people should have equal rights. We have. No. Why do I have to pay for 2 seats on a plane? I think you can figure this out on your own. Fat shaming is never okay. That's the big thing with the fat activists. Fat shaming is never okay. That's not true. It's sometimes okay. I can say that because I'm fat and I've been fat since I was small, right? Like, I got fat shamed at school, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad it happened. So it was okay at least that time, because I was the only victim. I get to say whether it's okay or not. I'm made up. I got fat shamed at school. I'd be documentary fat by now if that didn't... It's kept me a reasonable size. I don't want to be on Channel 5 struggling to get out the front door. It's bad enough after the holiday when your jeans don't fit. If your house doesn't fit you anymore... Are we meant to nod along and pretend that's not a health problem? You coming to watch the match, lad? I can't, mate. I can't get my house off. It is tight.
Good morning. It's Monday, Talk Radio Monday, July the 22nd, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Talk Radio's America. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Yes, we'll rally round the flag, boys, we'll rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We will rally from the hillside, we'll gather from the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Hurrah, forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, up with the Star Wars while we rally round the flag. Yes, boys, let's rally once again, shouting, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We are springing to the call of the loyal, true, and brave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. And our battle cry shall be, not one man shall be a slave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Our country forever. Down with the traitor, up with the star. Hurrah, boys, hurrah, boys, hurrah, boys, hurrah, boys, hurrah, boys, the battle cry of freedom. We are springing to the call of our brothers gone before, and sing the battle cry of freedom, and we'll fill the vacant place with 1,000,000 freemen more, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Our country forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star. For while we rally round the flag, boys, let's rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Our country forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, so down with the traitor, and up with the star. For we know what freedom is, not a man must be a slave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We're shouting the battle cry. We're shouting the battle cry. We're shouting. We're shouting. We're shouting. We're shouting. We're shouting. We're shouting the battle cry of freedom. Shouting the battle cry of
Thank you. Now we got the Bloody Tourist giving us the headlines.
Good morning, Cheryl. Anything going on? And good morning, everyone. It was less than 24 hours ago that President Biden walked away from his campaign for a second term. The political world has been turned upside down. Right after the announcement, a wide split emerged among Democrats. Biden and the Clintons endorsed Kamala Harris for the top spot on the Democrats' new ticket. Obama, Pelosi, Jeffries, and Schumer have not endorsed her. They want a new candidate contest. Can you imagine the infighting that's going on here? Harris says she wants to earn her place. Her campaign was bringing in $11 million an hour right after the president stepped aside. But one mega donor said he's closing his wallet to her. Donald Trump had harsh words for Biden. He says, he is the worst president in the history of our country. Then he said, who is going to run the country for the next 5 months? Republicans are picking up on this, calling on Biden to resign the presidency. If he can't run a campaign, how can he run the country? Now to the markets. Stocks up this morning. It is their first chance investors have had to respond to Biden dropping out, and a possible top-of-the-ticket place for Kamala Harris. Investors are commenting on this, too. A huge sell-off in technology Friday. What we're seeing today, I'm going to ask the question, is that a Trump rally? Especially the NASDAQ, it's up 202 points. Now look at Bitcoin, a solid rally there as well. This is a Trump trade. Again, another kind of Trump trade. Crypto's moving up as investors think Trump more likely to win. Bitcoin going to 67.6 right now. And by the way, Trump will address a Bitcoin conference later this month. Gold heading towards another record. Right now is 24.45, down a fraction, but still very close to record territory. It's a safe haven in times of turmoil. Interest rates are firm. The 10-year still below 4.25%, 4.21, and the 2-year just above 4.5. It's at 4.52. All right. On the show today, how's the president doing? His doctor should do a press briefing, but none has been scheduled. The president has not been seen in public since late last week when he retreated to his beach house to recuperate from COVID. What is his true condition? Can he run the country? It is Monday, July 22nd, 2024.
And that was the headlines. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, my take.
Was on Saturday morning. That's the markets. Now this. Sunday, 1:46 p.m. Eastern. President Biden's campaign for a second term ended, and all hell is breaking loose inside the Democrat Party. The president is reportedly angry at those senior Democrats who he thinks stabbed him in the back and forced him out. As the weekend unfolded, it turned into Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, and Jeffries, who have not endorsed Kamala Harris and who favor an open convention, versus the Bidens and the Clintons, who do support Harris and don't want a new candidate. Now, that is an ugly split, so close to a presidential election. The fight began immediately. Harris reportedly spent 10 hours on the phone looking for support from labor unions, civil rights groups, and congressional Democrats. No senior Democrat has thrown his or her hat in the ring at this point. But the opposition to Harris is so widespread that a challenge has to come soon. After all, time is running out. The New York Times says there is still time for new candidates to go through public scrutiny. Obama is calling for an open nominating process. He didn't even mention Harris. Meanwhile, the Clintons say they are, quote, honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris and will do whatever we can to support her, end quote. Now we're hearing some very pointed questions launched at Harris. How come you didn't say anything about the president's obvious mental and physical decline? Same for the president's closest advisors and his family. Their silence was at best misleading and at worst a lie. Is the president's true condition still being concealed? Possibly. He did not appear on camera when he stepped aside from the campaign. He's not been seen publicly since he retreated to his beach house late last week. This is important because Joe Biden is still the president with all the power that implies. Speaker Johnson questions whether he should still be the president. If he can't run his campaign and we can't see him and we've heard very little from his doctor, how can he run the country? We're back to that same question. Who is running the country? The suspicion is that it's Jill and Hunter Biden, and that's the way it's going to be for the next 5 months. What a mess of the Democrats' own making. Second hour of Varney just getting started.
And that was Stuart Varney's My Take. Oops, back in a minute. Thank you. And now the military shorts.
Why is Russia's only aircraft carrier more heavily armed than any other carrier in the world? This is the Admiral Kuznetsov, and it's a giant floating missile launcher. 12 P-700 Granite missiles are mounted on the ship. These are the biggest and heaviest airborne weapons in existence. At 7.3 tons in weight and 8.8 meters in length, the biggest warships could be sunk with only one strike. But for defense, the carrier is armed with 6 AK-630 guns. These are covered 30mm Gatling cannons that can fire 100 rounds per second. They automatically detect and target any dangers in the 7 kilometers surrounding the ship. And that's not all. Admiral Kuznetsov's fleet of around 20 aircraft is much better than most people think. There's 12 Su-33 air superiority fighters, 5 Su-25 ground assault aircraft, and roughly 6 K-27 helicopters, mostly used for anti-submarine warfare. So even though Russia's only aircraft carrier is a pile of junk, it is certainly well armed.
What were some habits of Germans that shocked American soldiers? During World War II, American soldiers encountered many unexpected and surprising habits of their German opponents. The first thing that caught the eye was that despite Germany's rich and deep culture, the Germans often behaved in a crude and overly liberated manner that astounded the Americans. One of the most striking features was their organization of everyday life. For a long time, the German army lacked proper washing and laundry facilities, resulting in high levels of unsanitary conditions. German Lieutenant Gottfried noted that they tried to keep clean, but it was extremely difficult in the conditions of trench life. It was from the Americans that the Germans adopted the habit of washing and laundering regularly. Gottfried even built the first bathhouse with his own hands, which allowed his soldiers to get rid of lice and other parasites. In addition, Americans were surprised at how the Germans often held celebrations right on the front lines. Even in the midst of fighting, they found time for music, singing, and drinking alcohol.
The Type 21 U-boats were German ocean-going submarines that started serial production in 1944. The Type 21 U-boats were created in connection with the increasing losses incurred by German submarines in the Battle of the Atlantic, related to the use of more and more sophisticated methods by the Western Allies. It was the first submarine designed as primarily as an underwater vessel, rather than as a surface vessel converted for submerged use. It was faster submerged than surfaced, about 17 knots versus 8 knots for Type 7. At that speed, it could keep up with convoys submerged, rather than having to surface out of sight, run ahead, submerge and wait. Its torpedo tubes reloaded faster, and it had more forward tubes, and none aft. If you look at its silhouette, it looks very much like the first U.S. nuclear submarine, the Nautilus. It was quieter, with special run-silent motors, and could dive deeper.
This is exactly what to do if you are intercepted by fighter jets. Immediately, 2 fighter jets will show up behind your aircraft. The lead fighter will rock its wings to signal that this is an interception. As the intercepted pilot, you need to remain predictable. Do not go down. Stay at your current direction, altitude, and speed. You must acknowledge the fighter's signal by rocking your wings. But after this, there's important maneuvers that the fighters might perform. If the fighter jets slowly turn to a different direction, it means you need to follow them. However, if they turn sharply across your nose and even fire flares, it's a warning to turn in the direction of the fighter. Then, if they circle a particular airport with landing gear down, they are directing you to land there. But if it's nighttime and dark, things are very different. If the fighter flashes their navigation lights, it means you have been intercepted. You need to signal back with navigation and landing lights. To be safe, the best option is to speak with air traffic control and the intercepting fighter on frequency 121.5.
The North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong did not adhere to any rules whatsoever. The Geneva Convention states that medical personnel, corpsmen, medics, what have you, are not supposed to be fired on. Early in the war, about the time I first got there, we were wearing the armbands with the Red Cross on it. All that did was make us a better target. North Vietnam did not sign the Geneva Convention, so it's a moot point. We took off the armbands very quickly and never wore them again. We were also supposed to be unarmed. I carried a shotgun and a pistol when I was in the field because we were likely to come face to face with the enemy, as I did in my first overnight stay in the field.
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little motivation.
I
get frustrated with humans when somebody's late and they upset. I get frustrated with humans when somebody borrows money from you and they don't pay it back and you upset. I get upset with humans when you go out to eat and they don't bring your food out the way you want your food out and you are so upset and you let them have it, but then you disappoint you when you don't let you have it. You give you a pass. You give you a pass. You are not where you're supposed to be financially, and you can give yourself a pass. You know you better than that. You know you should be further in life, but you keep letting you slide. That thing that's holding you back, that thing that's dragging you down, that thing is you.
Your biggest enemy is you. People don't understand it's you against you. The only person that gets in your way is you. Nobody else. It's you.
I need you to confront you because you're the one holding you up. I need you to confront you. I need you to look in the mirror and tell you, you are not going to do me like this no more. You're not going to continue to sabotage me. You're not. You're not going to keep procrastinating. I need you. You're not.
You're not a loser. You've just made decisions that have created an environment that feels like it. Go look in the mirror. Take responsibility for where you are and admit to yourself that you are where you are because of decisions that you made, because of weakness that you had, because of your lack of ability to do the hard things when things got hard. That's why you are where you are. And start right now fixing that. Start making better decisions right now, and before you know it, you'll be living a different life.
The only person you can control is you. So focus on making yourself who you want to be. Discipline your body. Get up early and go. Get after it, and you will become the person you want to be. And you become that person through one small decision at a time.
Become the person who cannot quit. Become the person who can say no to the things that they know they're supposed to say no to. Become the person who makes the right decision regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the hardships, regardless of the pain, regardless of the frustration. If you become that person, you have no limits in your life. There is no stopping that person.
You in 3 and you got 6 gears, but you're accustomed to 3, you're accustomed to 4. I challenge you to push it to all the gears you got. I want to see how far I can go. I want to see what I can accomplish. I want to see what I can do, what I can be, what I can have. I want to see. I don't want to see what I think I can do. I don't want to see what I think is possible. I want to see what my life would look like if I didn't count the cost, if I had the mentality that you gotta want it. I'm going to try to be the best that I can be, the strongest, the fastest, the smartest human being that I can become, better than I was yesterday, better than people thought I could be, better than I thought I could be. When you cut this off, I want you to go look yourself in the mirror and I want you to vow. No more excuses. Like from this day forward, I'm not going to be getting pumped up. I'm not just going to be fired up. I'm going to start applying. Because listen to me very closely. The difference between people who talk about it and people who do it is one simple word, application. They hear it and they don't just hear it, they digest it. And when they digest it, boom, they do something with it. I don't need you to learn a lot of stuff this year. I don't need you to learn 40 things this year. If you can learn one thing, I'm talking about learn it. I'm talking about put it deep within. Not you hear it, not you read it, not you see it. If you can give me one principle a month that you own, that becomes a part of who you are, that changes how you think, that changes how you behave. If you can become an executor, if you can execute, you can do the unthinkable. You can make all your milestones become a reality if it stops being a hobby. You're doing it when you feel like it. You're doing it when you get tired. You're doing it on your lunch break. You're not serious. You're not eating it. You're not eating it. You're not dreaming it. It's not haunting your dreams at night. I'm telling you right now, there are those of you are going to do the unthinkable if you can shut it down. You guys shut the TV down. You guys shut certain people down. You are minimizing right now. And you need to optimize.
This is going to be a full commitment to creating the kind of person that can make the right decision even when it's the last thing they want to do. When they're tired, when they're sore, when they're hungry, when they're stressed, when they're frustrated, when they're angry, when the world is crashing down on their shoulders, they will still make the right decision. Your only solution is to become that kind of a person. Start today. And in 365 days, you will look back and you will say, that was the day. That was the day that everything changed. That was the day that my life changed. That was the day that my family changed. That was the day my community changed, my state changed, and my country changed. Because I changed. Make that day today.
Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
A morning ritual. Ask yourself the following first thing in the morning. What am I lacking in attaining freedom from passion? What for tranquility? What am I? A mere body, a stateholder, or reputation? None of these things. What then? A rational being. What then is demanded of me? Meditate on your actions. How did I steer away from serenity? What did I do that was unfriendly, unsocial, or uncaring? What did I fail to do in all these things? Epictetus, Discourses, 4.6.34 through 35. Many successful people have a morning ritual. For some, it's meditation. For others, it's exercise. For many, it's journaling. Just a few pages where they write down their thoughts, fears, hopes. In these cases, the point is not so much the activity itself as it is the ritualized reflection. The idea is to take some time to look inward and examine. Taking that time is what Stoics advocated more than almost anything else. We don't know whether Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in the morning or at night, but we know he carved out moments of quiet alone time, and that he wrote for himself, not for anyone else. If you're looking for a place to start your own ritual, you could do worse than Marcus's example and Epictetus's checklist. Every day, starting today, ask yourself these same tough questions. Let philosophy and hard work guide you to better answers, one morning at a time, over the course of a life.
And that was the Daily Stoic. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
My question is, if we are all beloved children of God, how could he banish any of his children to an eternity of suffering in hell? Thanks, and God bless.
It's not so much God banishing, like God imposing this dreadful sentence. It's we banish ourselves. That's the tragedy of sin. Sin is a self-banishment, if you want. It's a self-exile from the land where God wants us to live. Hell is a corollary, if you want, of two more fundamental teachings, namely that God is love and that we're free, which means we can respond to that love or we can reject it. If we respond to it, then we have life and life to the full. If we reject it, it lights up the fires of hell within us. It sets up a kind of friction, a sort of spiritual friction. And so who's sending you to hell? It's not God. It's your own will. It's your own freedom is creating, if you want, the conditions for the possibility of this suffering.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Thank you. Now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, the fundamental principle of capitalism is the separation of state and economics. That is, the liberation of men's economic activities, of production and trade, from any form of intervention, coercion, compulsion, regulation, or control by the government. This is the essence of capitalism, which is implicit in its theory and in the operation of a free market. Unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter, The Intellectual Bankruptcy of Our Age, from the book, The Voice of Reason. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the 33 Strategies of War.
Keys to Warfare. For centuries, people have searched for the magic formula that would give them power to influence others through words. This search has been mostly elusive. Words have strange, paradoxical qualities. Offer people advice, for instance, no matter how sound, and you imply that you know more than they do. To the extent that this strikes at their insecurities, your wise words may merely have the effect of entrenching them in the very habits you want to change. Once your language has gone out into the world, your audience will do what they want with it, interpreting it according to their own preconceptions. Often, when people appear to listen, nod their heads, and seem persuaded, they are actually just trying to be agreeable, or even just to get rid of you. There are simply too many words inundating our lives for talk to have any real, long-lasting effect. This does not mean that the search for power through language is futile, only that it must be much more strategic and based on knowledge of fundamental psychology. What really changes us and our behavior is not the actual words uttered by someone else, but our own experience, something that comes not from without, but from within. An event occurs that shakes us up emotionally, breaks up our usual patterns of looking at the world, and has a lasting impact on us. Something we read or hear from a great teacher makes us question what we know, causes us to meditate on the issue at hand, and in the process, changes how we think. The ideas are internalized and felt as personal experience. Images from a film penetrate our unconscious, communicating in a pre-verbal way, and become part of our dream life. Only what stirs deep within us, taking root in our minds as thought and experience, has the power to change what we do in any lasting way.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you're a Democrat, you should vote Republican because there are things that don't disappear. Violence is one of them. Modernity is not distinguished by an aversion to violence. Violence is simply protean. It varies its outward form according to the social constellation at hand. Today, it is shifting from the visible to the invisible, from the frontal to the viral, from brute force to mediated force, from the real to the virtual, from the physical to the psychological, from the negative to the positive, withdrawing into the subcutaneous, subcommunicative, capillary, and neuronal space, creating the false impression that it has disappeared. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now here's Bill O'Reilly from his No Spin Zone lying to us once again. Not spinning, lying.
Fathers. Sign up for their free Founding Fathers 101 series today. I highly recommend it. All right, new poll, Reuters. 4 in 5 Americans fear the country is sliding into chaos. Okay, this is 1,202 U.S. adults. First question, job approval, not who you're going to vote for, job approval. Donald Trump, Biden. Trump 43, Biden 41. Do you believe the country is spiraling out of control? 80% of registered voters say yes.
Wrong. Lie. Absolute lie. He knows it's a lie. He just told us that it is 1,020 people or whatever that were surveyed. 1,000, not even 2,000. Used to be that they would at least have the decency to survey 2,000 people. Now they can't be bothered to do that. Okay? 1,000 people, that does not represent every registered voter in this country. There's millions, tens of millions of registered voters. And simply asking 1,000 of them what they think does not represent tens of millions. It just doesn't, as a matter of common sense. Okay? He knows that. But he tells you anyways. Why? 2 reasons. Ratings, so he can get rich. And number 2, intimidation factor. If somebody tells you that 80% of Americans say this, it's much more intimidating than saying 80% of those surveyed. That's the proper way to report this. Let's see, what does it say here? It is, it was 80% of registered voters. 80% of those surveyed believe that the country is spinning out of control or whatever. That's the proper way to report the poll. To report it his way is a flat-out lie. He knows what he's doing. He knows that he's lying, but he does it anyways so he can get rich and so he can have a little bit of prestige. Shame on him. Back in a minute. Thank you. So, the supplement to Bill O'Reilly. One of the things that you want to do with Bill O'Reilly, don't emulate Bill O'Reilly. He has his own show, but he used to be on Fox. Why is he no longer on Fox? Because he resigned. Why did he resign? Because he was under pressure. There was various socio-political interest groups that were going after Fox to get him removed because they claimed that he was some kind of a pervert. So his answer, instead of saying, screw you, I'm going to fight this and go from there, he instead basically confesses that he's a pervert by quitting or resigning under pressure. He did a President Nixon. If there's anything to learn from President Nixon for the average person, for the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, it is never, ever resign under pressure. Make them fire you because you can always go to people afterwards and say, I got robbed. They had it in for me. The fix was in. But when you go ahead and resign under pressure, it is tantamount to a confession. And a confession will stick to you like your skin for the rest of your life. So for the rest of his life, no matter how many new shows he gets and tries to get everybody to pretend that they don't know what happened to him, he's a pervert. Not because I say so, because he did. Because he confessed by resigning under pressure. Now, the person that you want to emulate in this, oddly enough, I'm not a real big fan of Sean Hannity in terms of his personal behavior, but in this regard I am. They tried to do the same thing on Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity fought it tooth and nail. Sean Hannity is still on Fox, and he actually won. And that's the same thing Bill O'Reilly could have done. He could have fought it and won and still be on Fox instead of having to have his own little, I don't even know if he has a station or he just has a YouTube channel or whatever, but and it also affects him from the standpoint that he is, again, obsessed with fairness. He's scared to death of the left, that they're going to do him again like they did him before. And by the way, he has this new show because of Sean Hannity. He saw how Sean Hannity handled the same situation. He saw Sean Hannity fight it and win, and he then realized that he should have done the same thing. And so that's when he decided he's going to go ahead and make a comeback. But for him, it's too late. He's already confessed. The only way that he can get this stain off of him is if he can produce some sort of irrefutable, ironclad evidence that he is clean as a whistle on these charges. So that's really what he should be doing, is looking to salvage his reputation, prove that the people that brought the charges are liars, and then he gets his reputation back. That's what he should be doing, is trying to rehabilitate his reputation, and he's not going to do it by simply pretending that he didn't resign in disgrace. Back in a minute. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is play the second half of Chapter 12 of the book, The 10 Books That Every Conservative Must Read by Benjamin Weicker. We started it on Saturday, but there wasn't enough time to finish it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it now.
During these these as so many necessary props for its own support. The support of its own bureaucracy will call for ever greater funding. The internal sources of taxation then must be called into operation, and internal tax laws and federal assessors and collectors spread over this immense country. We will end up with a permanent and continued system of tax laws of the Union, executed in the bowels of the states by many thousand officers, dependent as to the assessing and collecting of federal taxes solely upon the Union. The federal government will grow, if even merely to feed itself. Soon enough, a vast and invasive federal bureaucracy will arise. The tyranny from above will become ever more oppressive because the federal government will soon become an entity bent on its own self-preservation and expansion rather than on the public good. A large standing army is a great danger, the federal farmer noted, and provisions must be made that the national army does not use its powers to depress and enslave the people. But it is equally true that a large body of selfish, unfeeling, unprincipled civil officers has a like or a more pernicious tendency to the same point. Given the size of the country, and hence the extent of the federal reach, a vast number of officers is necessary to execute a national system in this extensive country. Since these bureaucracies will be the creation of the National Congress, and the legislators will be responsible for the appointment of the bureaucrats who fill them, then enormous numbers of federal civil servants become direct dependents on Congress. The welfare of the bureaucratic dependent class then becomes a prime goal of the national legislature. Security against this limitless growth must be placed in a federal republic, that is, a confederation of state republics, which is a league of friendship among the states or sovereignties for the common defense and mutual welfare, where each state expressly retains its sovereignty and all powers not expressly given to Congress. In this federal republic, the several state or district legislatures must retain the means of opposing heavy internal taxes and oppressive measures in the proper stages. The state governments must act as barriers between Congress and the pockets of the people. Endless federal bureaucracies cannot grow without feeding on tax dollars. But the proposed Constitution, without a Bill of Rights, does not provide such protection, so that if the National Congress, which is given the power to lay taxes at pleasure for the general welfare, does indeed lay unnecessary oppressive taxes, the Constitution will provide no remedy for the people or the states. The people must bear them, or have recourse, not to any constitutional checks or remedies, but to that resistance which is the last resort, and founded in self-defense. But again, Tocqueville reminds us of a sadly neglected means of resistance and defense: self-control. If we look to the federal government to provide for our complete cradle-to-grave welfare, to bail out our foolish personal and business decisions, to subsidize our every whim and comfort, to underwrite our immorality, to write out endless pork-barrel checks to local projects we don't want to pay for ourselves, then who is to blame when we embrace the soft despotism the federal government so solicitously offers? If we do not have the virtue to control ourselves, then why should the federal government control itself? Other dread powers of Congress and the Supreme Court. The Anti-Federalists had more worries than the proposed federal taxing power. As we have seen, they were alarmed at the implications of the federal government assuming the undefined task of promoting the general welfare. Their fear was only multiplied by the Constitution's asserting that, 1. Congress had the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department thereof, and 2, that the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. The first gives unlimited power to Congress. The second gives unlimited power to the federal judiciary, most prominently the Supreme Court. Combined with the power of direct internal taxation, these two provisions would ensure a complete consolidation of power on the federal level. And in the words of Brutus, there is then nothing valuable to human nature, nothing dear to free men, but what is within its power. Patrick Henry warned, this Constitution can counteract and suspend any of our state laws that contravene its oppressive operation, for they have the power of direct taxation, which suspends our Bill of Rights, and it is expressly provided that they can make all laws necessary for carrying their powers into execution, and it, the proposed Constitution, is declared paramount to the laws and constitutions of the states. In regard to the necessary and proper clause, the danger resides both in the vagueness of the Constitution itself and in human nature. As to the vagueness, Brutus drives home the central problem with giving Congress enormous powers to promote the general welfare. It is, to repeat, a concept so entirely vague that nearly anyone can use it for anything. It will then be a matter of opinion what tends to the general welfare, and the Congress will be the only judges in the matter. To provide for the general welfare is an abstract proposition which mankind differ in the explanation of, as much as they do on any political or moral proposition that can be proposed. The most opposite measures may be pursued by different parties, and both may profess that they have in view the general welfare, and both sides may be honest in their professions, or both may have sinister views. If Congress can use it for anything, they will. These proposed federal powers will only be intensified by a natural tendency in every man and every body of men, who, when invested with power, are ever disposed to increase it, and to acquire a superiority over everything that stands in their way. And the Supreme Court? The Constitution declares itself to be the supreme law of the land, notes Brutus. Its preamble asserts that the supreme law is ordained to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And as we've seen, it claims the power for Congress to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying out these goals. But the very vagueness of these goals will mean that the federal judiciary must explain the Constitution, not only according to its letter, but according to its spirit and intention. And no one doubts that they would strongly incline to give it such a construction as to extend the powers of the general government. Indeed, it is precisely because the Supreme Court is authorized to decide upon the meaning of the Constitution according to the spirit and intention of it, that it will not be subordinate to, but above, the legislature. It will not make laws directly, but establish judicial principles of interpretation, which, being received by the legislature, will enlarge the sphere of their power beyond all bounds. The power of the Supreme Court and the power of Congress grow together, and, in proportion as the general government acquires power and jurisdiction, by the liberal construction which the judges may give the Constitution, will those of the states lose its rights, until they become so trifling and unimportant as not to be worth having. I have added emphasis to liberal in this last quote. Obviously, Brutus was not speaking about liberal in our sense of the term relating to the far left. He means that the Supreme Court will inevitably tend to expand federal power by expansive interpretations of the Constitution. But there is a serious and important connection between his warning and the advance of the causes of liberalism through judicial activism. Liberalism seeks centralized power, especially through the judiciary, because it is a revolutionary force trying to change, from the top down, the habits, beliefs, customs, and institutions on the local level. To be more exact, liberalism is a top-down secular revolution trying to change a conservative culture built by Judeo-Christian beliefs from the bottom up. For them, promoting the general welfare means changing the conservative views on marriage, the family, sexuality, abortion, euthanasia, that still largely define the locals, clinging, as Obama contemptuously said, to their guns and religion. Since the locals still vote, staging a cultural revolution through Congress is not easy. but staging a revolution through the Supreme Court and the federal court system is. You only have to win one case, like Roe v. Wade, and suddenly all state laws and all moral convictions and arguments to the contrary must bow and crumble before the will of 5 Supreme Court judges. Abortion is made legal, and Congress is free to enact law after law that extends abortion even to the infanticide of partial birth abortion. The destruction of marriage by the gay rights movement will undoubtedly follow the same course. Win a Supreme Court case, establish a precedent, state and local laws to the contrary are all struck down, and Congress advances the agenda with more extensive laws based upon the original judicial victory. That was exactly the fear of Brutus. Such court cases establish principles and precedents that strike down state and local laws, and moreover, give Congress the power to enact legislation that advances the revolution. Having the unlimited ability to define the Constitution and strike down any laws made even by Congress as unconstitutional meant for Brutus that there is no power above them, i.e. the Supreme Court, to control their decisions. They cannot be controlled by the laws of the legislature. In short, they are independent of the people, of the legislature, and of every power under heaven. Men placed in this situation will generally soon feel themselves independent of heaven itself. That, perhaps, is why they feel entirely free to interpret the First Amendment that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion to mean that religion must be expunged from the public square. The ultimate choice, federal republic or consolidated government. We recall that the Federalists argued for a new definition of republic. A republic was not a monarchy or aristocracy, asserted Madison, but a government that, in contrast to direct rule democracy, allowed the people to rule indirectly through representation. Representation allowed for an extended republic, so that the Union would be considered a confederacy founded on Republican principles and composed of Republican members. Against this, the Anti-Federalists repeatedly stressed 2 points. A proper republic had to be small. The state was the natural limit of its size, even with representation. And the power given to the national government by the Constitution would eventually swallow up the state republics into one despotic national government. Opponents of the Constitution therefore argued that we faced a choice between a federal republic, where the states remain sovereign republics, and a consolidated government, where the national government swallows up state and local government. Despite the argumentative efforts of the Federalists, some anti-Federalists considered the consolidated government not to be a republic at all. As anti-Federalist Old Whig, whose identity remains unknown, starkly put it, we will either have a confederacy of republics, i.e. a federal republic, or we must cease altogether to retain the republican form of government. What exactly is the difference? To erect a federal republic, we must first make a number of states on republican principles, instructed the anti-federalist Federal Farmer, where each state has a government organized for internal management of its affairs. The anti-federalists agreed that there needed to be a national supplemental government, for the states must unite under a federal head and delegate to it powers to make and execute laws in certain enumerated cases under certain restrictions. But in a federal republic, each state manages its own internal affairs, and the states delegate to the Union power to manage general concerns. The states are primary. They are the republics. The national government is not a super-republic, but a federal head that acts for the good of the sovereign states as a whole, a head dependent on and kept within limited bounds by the local governments. Whatever defects there are in such a federal republic, they are as a feather in the balance against a mountain, compared with those which would, infallibly, be the result of the loss of general liberty, and that happiness men enjoy under a frugal, free, and mild government. By contrast, what the Federalists really wanted, charged the Anti-Federalists, what their Constitution really ordained, was a government that swept up all the local and state powers into one national consolidated government. To form a consolidated or one entire government, there must be no state or local governments, but all things, persons, and property must be subject to the laws of one legislature alone, to one executive and one judiciary. Such a government will operate immediately upon the persons and property of individuals and not on states. It is by operating immediately upon the property and lives of individuals that the national government usurps the proper domain of the state and local governments. To prevent this, the national government should only be allowed to relate directly to the states, and the state governments should stand between the union and individuals. Of course, no federalist was hoping to create a federal government that would usurp all of the state's powers and prerogatives. Rather, they were trying, through the Constitution, to give enough power to the federal government to do its appointed tasks. That having been said, we recall that the Federalist Hamilton thought the national government should be strengthened by acting directly on the people, and the more it intertwined itself with the daily lives of individuals, the more individuals would depend directly on the federal, rather than the state and local, government. That is precisely what the anti-federalists feared most, and given the ever-extending reach of our federal government over the minutest aspects of our daily lives today, we must say that their fears were more than justified. Our federal government is indeed consolidating all powers unto itself. Moreover, the situation is, if anything, worse than the anti-federalists feared, because state governments themselves have become direct dependents on Washington. They have yielded their autonomy by taking ever greater mounds of federal dollars for state and local projects and concerns. The national legislature thereby rules all state legislatures, supplanting them rather than supplementing them. Whom shall we blame? In great part, ourselves. Our difficulty, recalling Tocqueville, is that we are impatient, too often motivated by envy and addicted to physical gratification. We want more than we can pay for, and we want it now. Impatient, envious, and materialistic individuals use credit cards and run up impossibly large debts. These same individuals demand more state and local services and projects than they are willing to pay for through their state and local taxes. The state and local governments then turn to Washington as the ultimate credit card to give them what their own state citizens want but don't want to pay for. So, the national government engages in reckless deficit spending, sells treasury bills, notes, and bonds, and then prints money so that the President and Congress, in exchange for votes, can give to individuals and states what they want but can't pay for. As a result, rather than being intermediate institutions that provide directly for the daily lives of its people, state and local governments become hopelessly dependent on the national government. This, in turn, puts enormous power in the hands of the national government to dictate the details of the lives of every individual, of every local government, and every state. How could this situation be remedied? In great part, according to the true conservative, the true Republican anti-federalist principle of rebuilding ourselves economically from the ground up, that is, on the familial, local, and state levels. That will restore true independence. First things first, if a family cannot rule itself economically and runs up hopeless debts, there is no hope for reducing the national debt. One most effective way of doing this is called the envelope system, which my wife champions. Each month you have a budgeted amount set for all major categories of expenditure: mortgage, food, utilities, gas, etc. Some items are paid for by check, mortgage, utilities. Other items are paid for out of actual cash set aside in envelopes labeled accordingly: food, gas. Credit cards are cut up. No money is spent beyond what is budgeted. Extra money is plowed back into debt reduction. That's pay-as-you-go family economy. You get exactly what you can pay for, and no more. The same pay-as-you-go plan must be embraced by local and state governments. Budgets must be set in stone and paid for directly by local and state revenue. All projects, all improvements, all services should arise from and be paid for on the local and state level. Loosening the hold of the national government can only occur through a gradual but steady decrease in dependence on federal dollars. The decrease in dependence can only occur through local and state governments providing for their own general welfare through their own money. Local and state taxpayers must be content to live with what they will actually pay for, rather than looking to the federal government to provide things paid for by federal income tax, i.e. other people's money, or deficit spending, our children's money, or printing fiat currency, play money. In short, the ultimate choice rests with us. Do we want a federal union of state republics or one giant consolidated national government? Here, we must be excruciatingly clear that the issue is not merely a contest between two different sizes of government, state and national, but two qualitatively different kinds of government with entirely different aims. Again, the Anti-Federalists were profoundly conservative in wanting to defend human social life as it grows from the ground up, from the family to the village, the city, the county, and the state. Much like Aristotle, they considered the state to be the natural size limit of good government. Anything beyond that, because it was too far removed from local concerns, loves, needs, and particular aspirations of the people, could only be a top-down despotism that disregarded the real concerns of the people in the pursuit of the glories of its national empire or its own vision of what constitutes happiness and the general welfare. The Anti-Federalists passionately fought for and won a Bill of Rights. They believed that only if these enumerated rights were staunchly and explicitly protected would the built-in tendencies toward the consolidation of national power in the Constitution be kept in check. The problem is, of course, that the usurpations of power by the Supreme Court and Congress, predicted so cogently by the Anti-Federalist Brutus, have either twisted or all but erased the enumerated rights. We have lost the original tension between Federalist and Anti-Federalist arguments that really defined our founding, and we have become, willingly or unwillingly, the very worst kind of Federalists feared by the Anti-Federalists: complete dependence on an increasingly despotic federal government.
And that was Chapter 8, if you listen to him, but according to what I'm reading right here, Chapter 11, from the 10 books every conservative must read, plus 4 not to miss, and One Imposter by Benjamin Weicker, Ph.D. And that was the Anti-Federalists. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Talk Radio's America. Chapter 12, Money Propels Talk Radio to the Right.
12. Money propels talk radio to the right. One of the Clinton era's most important contributions to talk radio's deepening conservatism had nothing to do with the medium's hatred of the president, or, indeed, with partisan politics. A piece of bipartisan legislation inadvertently served to solidify talk radio into the medium we now know, delivering nearly all conservative programming all the time in virtually every market. The 1996 Telecommunications Act paved the way for today's vertically and horizontally integrated radio industry, in which large publicly traded corporations own hundreds of stations and syndication companies. The legislation, a no-brainer, winning 507 of Congress's 535 votes, eliminated the national cap on station ownership, which had prevented any one company from owning more than 40 stations. The law also raised ownership limits in individual markets. The regulatory changes accelerated an ongoing process of consolidation, which had been spurred by earlier relaxations of limits in 1984, 1992, and 1994. Within 5 years of the 1996 law's passage, the 3 largest radio conglomerates, iHeartMedia, formerly Clear Channel, Infinity Broadcasting, and Cumulus Media, owned close to 1,700 stations. By 2002, 21 companies owned more than 40 stations, and the 10 largest companies controlled 67% of the industry's revenues. These large media conglomerates had no political interest in pushing conservative messaging on their airwaves. But when they assumed control of struggling stations, they made an understandable business decision. They reprogrammed stations to broadcast the profitable in format of the moment. In the second half of the 1990s, that format was conservative talk. The success of Limbaugh and all conservative stations such as KVI and KSFO signaled to corporate chieftains that conservative talk promised the best rate of return. Additionally, as syndicators provided more conservative programming to meet demand, the combination of the barter method and vertical integration made predominantly conservative formats more economical. Syndication allowed stations to air shows without paying for talent and production. Instead of paying cash up front for programming, stations handed syndicators a fixed number of commercial slots per hour to sell in exchange for the right to air a show. And vertical integration ensured even more conservative talk reached listeners because owners could save money by airing shows produced by their own syndication arms. If syndication spread conservative talk more widely, it also encouraged hosts to spend more of their airtime on conservative politics. Many hosts, including Hannity and Liddy, spent more hours on politics after their programs entered syndication. In syndication, they faced pressure from executives to adhere to the theme and format stations were selling to listeners, usually conservative talk. And hosts had to appeal to listeners across the country, which meant discarding apolitical or less partisan topics that worked with local audiences but wouldn't translate nationally. Hosts also found that they had to skew farther right if they wanted to maintain and grow their new national audiences. Los Angeles star John Cobelt recalled that when he and partner Ken Champeau took their show national in the late 1990s, they couldn't possibly satisfy the audiences many of their stations attracted. The other hosts on these stations spewed such venom toward President Clinton that listeners perceived the populist, less doctrinaire Cobelt and Champeau as insufficiently far right. Large corporate owners also pushed conservative media because, from their perspective, it was usually safe. Conservative hosts sometimes got themselves in trouble, but not with their own audience. Crucially, many of the people most offended by conservative radio's content weren't listeners in the first place. And during this period, before stations streamed on the internet, only the most egregious talk radio howlers reached the ears of non-fans. In any case, the antics on conservative talk radio were almost never scandalous, rude, and shocking like the stuff on Hot Talk and Guy Talk formats. For instance, no one on syndicated conservative radio ever pulled a stunt like Guy Talk host Greg Opie Hughes and Anthony Cumia did in 2002. The popular nationally syndicated duo was fired by Viacom, their station's parent company, for orchestrating and broadcasting a bit in which a couple purportedly had sex in St. Patrick's Cathedral while one of the host's sidekicks provided blow-by-blow commentary. Edgy talk like this, often produced locally, posed risks that predictable political shows didn't. That sounded good to corporate owners with lots of debt on the line. It also sounded good to big companies such as Disney and Viacom, whose many non-radio interests might be sullied by controversy. Conservative hosts were unlikely to expose ownership to fines, put a station's license at risk, or threaten spillover consequences. Radio-centric companies and individual owners were comparatively tolerant of controversy and offense, even though a single serious case could upend their business, especially in markets with smaller advertising bases. In bigger cities, radio-focused owners had the flexibility to stand by such content. They didn't have to worry about other businesses, and they knew that entertaining radio would keep attracting listeners in a competitive marketplace, even if some people were offended. When the controversial and often lewd Tom Likas broadcast in Miami in the 1980s, Station management made clear that he didn't have to worry about losing advertisers. There were more queued up. He just had to be sure he didn't lose the station its license. The 1995 firing of top-rated WABC host Bob Grant is a study in the finer sensibilities of big corporate owners. Disney had just taken over the station after buying Capital Cities ABC, when Grant was let go in response to one of the more veiled racist comments of his long career. After news broke that Commerce Secretary Ron Brown, who was black, had been in a plane crash, Grant made a very crude joke. Because Grant counted himself a pessimist, he said, it might just turn out that Brown was the crash's only survivor. Other owners had tolerated Grant's insensitive, provocative verbal grenades for decades. To name but two, he referred to blacks as savages and described David Dinkins, New York's black mayor, as a washroom attendant. But facing threats of protests and boycotts, Disney wasn't about to put itself on the line for him. Less than 2 weeks later, Grant returned to the airwaves on WABC's main competitor, WOR, operated by the family-owned, radio-centric Buckley Broadcasting Corporation. As the years went by, conservative radio would become riskier. Increasing competition during the 2000s drove hosts toward more outrageous and incendiary commentary in an effort to distinguish themselves. At the same time, Internet streaming and watchdog groups such as Media Matters brought hosts' words to broader, less agreeable audiences who were ready to apply pressure to advertisers. But during the consolidation of the late 1990s, conservative hosts were a comparatively safe bet. What mattered to the bottom line was programming suitable to economies of scale, and conservative hosts provided it. Radio that appealed to audiences throughout the country and that was sufficiently inoffensive and isolated in a right-leaning echo chamber, that it wouldn't raise many hackles from advertisers or other business partners. Once again, conservative media was spreading and becoming more strident, not because broadcasters wanted to change the political landscape, but because talk radio made better business sense than the alternatives.
And that was Chapter 12 of Talk Radio's America, How an Industry Took Over a Political Party That Took Over the United States. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.